So, what is viewer burnout and how do you deal with it? Well, to start off with, you need to understand something a little bit about how viewership works. In more or less decade long intervals, viewers take interest in certain activities. So, there's the height of westerns, there was the height of space movies, there's actions. We just come out of the superhero genre. It's dying. People are trying to avoid having it actually die, but it is going to die fairly quickly unless something radically changes on it. And this happens because each of these genres, if you look at it, has a defining characteristic. There's kind of this way that the story beats work out. In westerns, they're very episodic. It's centered around individual characters. There's slow pacing with moments of high action. You have superhero movies where, regardless of what things occur, you know that there is a set of good guys, there's a set of bad guys, and the good guys are going to win. And you're stuck with that. That's just the superhero genre. It effectively cornered itself in with the writing. And you have something similar like you have war movies. War movies, no matter what you do, there needs to be battle scenes. Things are kind of loud, and you have a us versus them mentality, and that's how these movie types work. Now, apply this to Star Wars, and you find that that doesn't actually hold up. Star Wars, even from the original trilogy and the prequel trilogy, doesn't hold to that genre in the same way. The original trilogy was a very classical hero's journey. It was good versus evil, and it had its own pacing. It was a slower pacing, there was some moments of higher action. It was a little like a western, but it was mostly a hero's journey, and had its own feel. Then you go into the prequel era, and good versus bad is no longer fully explained. It's no longer just, we know we're the good guys, we know they're the bad guys, we have to fight them, and we're going to win, or everything's going to go to crap. It's up in the air a little bit on who's good, who's bad, until you figure out Palpatine's playing both sides, at which point it's very clear that if both sides would just get together and talk and realize that they worked for the same guy, everything would kind of resolve itself. That goes into a bit more about Dooku's character. But effectively speaking, the prequels happen because everyone's unwilling to look beyond their own nose for the most part. They're so enamored with what's specifically going on that they can't take a minute to pull back and realize that some of the stuff doesn't add up. Now, that has a very different style of play. It has more action and it has more like politics scenes, but it plays out very differently. This means that if you have an audience that is enamored with one type of things, eventually speaking, most of that audience is going to get, burned out, and then you switch over to the other one. So if you start in the prequels, you're enamored with that, eventually you'll kind of burn out, you'll go over to the original trilogy, where you're on a different series, and your tolerance for the prequels will actually rebuild itself, because you're away from it. And Star Wars can do this more or less ad infinitum. The reason for this is because of the various eras. Star Wars has things like the Old Republic, have the exploration of Star Wars itself, which is where you can stick a lot of horror movies. So you could have a whole horror genre just running in Star Wars. And you can have it in the entire time you can have pirate movies wherever you want. And pirate movies are a lot like you could have Jack Sparrow. If for whatever reason Pirates of the Caribbean takes off again, you just go in Star Wars, go just off the Hutt space and you do pirate movies all you want. And that fits perfectly fine in Star Wars. So Star Wars is unlike any other series, any other system, and any other genre because it can adapt to viewership burnout, to your viewer burnout, and you can avoid having a situation where your viewers look at it and they go, dude, not another Star Wars movie. It's the same thing every time. Why do we watch this? You go in, you know what's going to happen. And that's what causes it. Westerns fell because you go and you know roughly what's going to occur. War movies fall because you know it. You go and you know it's going to occur. People get tired of watching the same thing over and over and over and over. But with Star Wars, you can always turn that around. You can always take the time to say, hey, the bad guys can win. That happened a lot in the Old Republic. The Sith had dominance more than once across the galaxy, and we're not talking just the Palpatine's reign as Emperor. There were several times when there was Sith doing things. There was times when the Sith and the Jedi cooperated. So you never truly know what's going to occur at the various points in time of Star Wars. So you avoid viewership burnout by having many things running. You have obviously one major overarching plot. It would be the prequel trilogy or the original trilogy. You have your main sector. But when that story ends, kind of the way that Infinity War ended with Marvel, instead of falling with the fall of it, because, at the end of Infinity War, the superhero genre is dying off because of that. There's no major plotline left. And you can't then re-entice people into a superhero movie because they know what's going to happen. So instead of going into Star Wars and saying, hey, we're going to do the original trilogy again, you go and you make a different series. So I hope that that's convincing on what makes Star Wars unique and why, viewership burnout isn't something that it should have to worry about.